the Marketing Association. I also mainly run Did It, a 50 plus person digital marketing agency. I'm here at DigiMarCon, New England, where Rob Griffin has been emceeing and speaking and pretty much running around, practically running the show. So, first thing I'd want to have you mention is that your session was, if I remember correctly, was mainly ABM focused or
Hmm.
B2B marketing
Correct.
focused. So, what's the Reader's Digest of that session? So, if people sort of weren't able to attend but want to get the distilled part of that, what was the
Yeah,
gist?
the key theme for me, and great to see you again, by the way, Kevin.
Likewise.
Oh my God, I've known each other for what, 20 something odd years at this
Yeah,
point.
let's
I
not
feel
think
like the
about it.
old
Yeah,
guys
yeah,
hanging
let's
out
not
here.
think about it.
But the key theme, I think, for me that I want people to take away from it that ABM, account based marketing. Yeah, there's a lot of AI and technology involved, but it's really a marketing approach. It's a way to go about better B2B digital marketing and building out a pipeline. Yeah, this technology is also named ABM, but you don't have to have ABM technology to do ABM.
Right.
And that's the key theme I want people to take away with. And I even referenced in there a speech Lester Wunderman gave in 1967 at MIT, when he talked about describing when he first coined direct marketing, talking about, making sales and marketing a single affair, building a closer relationship between buyers and sellers, making it personal and interactive. He wrote it just about trying to make direct mail better. And I think it's more true about ABM today and B2B digital marketing than it was when he wrote it back in the 60s. So that's my key theme for everybody. Basic marketing principles don't go out of style.
Absolutely. And one thing that I think underpins a lot of the ABM is this idea that there's no single decision maker anymore for a lot of
Correct.
these decisions, right? So you really do need this sort of multi-pronged approach, and that's sort of the whole point about account-based marketing as
Hmm.
opposed to just marketing to individuals that may or may not have titles within an
Well, and that's
organization.
the irony of ABM. Like, accounts don't buy stuff and have problems. People that work at those accounts do, but they all have one thing in common: the account of the company that they work for.
Right.
You know, but they'll have different people interested in buying, a Honeywell or Thermo Fisher's products or whatever. Insert whatever the company. You might have anywhere from 5 to 12 people that represent the buying committee, and they all might want it, but for very different reasons. And so, to your point, you really need to think about the user within those accounts and,
Right.
what are the pain points they're having? How are you going to make their lives better? And you heard that echoed with everybody speaking after me today. It was all about, people first, starting with the customer. What do they need? And I always tell people trying to do ABM, have your content and your marketing messaging really help the person buy what they need to solve a problem. Don't try and sell them features and functions,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the Hippocratic Oath, right? Don't do harm, do good,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you're supposed to go in there and save the person's business, and if you're not able to move the needle for them and justify your costs, what are you doing there,
Yeah.
right? You really need to be doing that. It's interesting you mentioned about like understanding the motivations of the different people that are in an ABM social graph, right, or document around a company, and sometimes though people don't even realize they have a problem, right? And I
Yeah.
think that in ABM, that's where I feel like earned media sometimes steps in,
Hmm.
or a different approach. I mean, for example, I talk to a lot of people about SEO, and a good chunk of the people have never really thought about what happens when there's no search engine results page and a person just asks a chatbot like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini for an answer, and there's only one. How do you influence that? Like, what is that? That's not
Hmm.
really SEO, right? But it's driven off of the same data that's out there and crawlable and indexable that drives a decision, right, around
Hmm.
what the LLM will show. So people have not even started to wrap their heads around AI visibility yet, right? They're
Hmm.
still thinking about the search engine results page, and so I have to end up sort of evangelizing, like, hey guys, you know, this may not be a problem now because whatever 3, 5, 7% of queries in most high value categories may be a chatbot query. But what happens when that's 10, 15, 20%,
Hmm.
right? And there's no SERP. There's just If you need a conference hotel in the Back Bay, it's the Westin, right?
Yep.
One answer, that's it.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially when you think about it from an ABM perspective. I mentioned earlier, like, if you think about the experience and the buying process, a lot of brands now will use a Drift or some sort of chat bot even on
Yeah,
their
sure.
site. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's not going to replace the BDR and the SDRs and the sales team, but you have a lot of prospects that are curious, interested in your products. They want to dig a little deeper, but a couple things. They're not ready to talk to a salesperson and get a full demo yet.
Yeah.
But to your point, a big percentage of that population, and that percentage is going to grow only going forward, that they're used to just talking to chat bots and having
Yeah.
AI answers come their way. I mean,
Yeah.
my kids won't ever type into the browser on their phone what they want. They hit the little button and they say, "What is this? When is this?"
Right.
And I think to your point, there's only going to be more of that. And so that's where again, good ABM is omni-channel, multiple touch points. It's not just search, it's not just display, it's not just content syndication. And you have to use all these pieces. And the more you can have different pieces and engaging with unknown prospects all the way through to known prospects that have opted in and to what you're doing and they're in your nurture stream, they're in your email database and all that, is the more you can interact with them, the more you can validate the intent of their behavior.
Right.
Because the irony I think of the whole thing is, you and I grew up, really kind of cut our chops in search, in the industry, right?
For sure.
And yet everything behind the AI and intent and an ABM, it's all keywords and topics. It's like search all over again.
Yeah.
Just you're applying that keyword data in different ways, but it's still really predicated on there's a keyword, somebody has a behavior. What's the intent of that behavior?
Yeah.
It's a lot of old school search stuff coming back again, right? It's
For
really
sure.
funny.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I hear a lot of folks sort of wringing their hands around in the areas of ABM is, the sort of destruction of the identity graph, right?
Mm-hmm.
With third party cookies eventually disappearing. But of course, having been gone in Safari for a long time and Firefox as well, for the most part, the identity graph is a big part of ABM, right? Understanding who everyone is, where they are, so that you can feed them the right
Mm-hmm.
message at the right time to get them a little emotional
Yeah.
around the situation.
That's an interesting one, right? Because my answer to that is yes and no. And I know that sounds like a vague, classic, agency answer. And I'm an agency guy, so of course, I got an agency answer. But the yes of it is ABM at the end of the day, and the ABM technology platforms, they're just a CDP, a customer data platform, and a demand side platform, a DSP for programmatic activation off of that B2B customer data, right? And so the ones that did it really good and early were building out custom segmentation, that they were translating that segmentation into purchasable media targeting off of their first party data.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really an issue. And because a lot of this technology has been around in the B2C world for 20 years,
Sure.
right? And the B2B guys are kind of having a little bit of an awakening for it, if you will, right? And gals, of course, not to exclude anybody, but so some of them kind of took the short path, looking over the fence, watching their B2C cousins and how they did it. So they'd pounce on a Zoom Info, they'd pounce on a Bombora, and they would use a third party to do it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the companies I work with, Intensify, in their AI, they use that third party data, but then they also use the AI to go look at the client's webpage, the competitor's webpage. What keywords are people using to get there? What other websites are they going to and articles they're reading? And the AI will make interpretations and make judgment calls on the content. This is very top of the funnel content. It's what is a CDP? Middle of the funnel article is longer form, deeper content, and it's talking about features and functions, and then this other white paper that they might be reading is really about how to pick the right CDP for you. Well, in that case, they probably are BANT qualified. They've got a budget, they've got a use case, so you're really trying to understand kind of where they are in that. And so there is some value of the third party data in that equation, but like with Intensify, because they're using that AI and they're making that assessment of it, if you're AT&T and Verizon and you go to Bombora, you're picking the same keywords and topics off the shelf.
Yeah.
Well, one, that's not very helpful from a competitor perspective. Two, we all know that's going away. Now, if I go use something like an Intensify, I'll essentially have custom bespoke keywords and topics that the AI is generating, and I can go through it because just like everything, right? We know this, but a lot of people don't. You know, you don't can't just let the AI go run willy nilly all on its own. So when the AI comes back with that, you kind of just go through it and you set your negative targeting. You set your exclusions. You're like, yes, 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 no, 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 yes, yes, yes. And you're making the AI smarter as you go. And I think when brands put in that extra effort up front to really synthesize qualitative and quantitative data inputs to have a better idea of their ideal customer and then get their segmentation right and then translate that into targeting, they're a lot less reliant on the third-party data inputs. But there's a lot of people that started it in the early days that only really did it off of the third-party data. So
Right.
technically, yeah, that's ABM, but I don't know if that's good ABM, if you will.
It has been interesting to watch some tactics bubble to the surface that are sort of potentially non-intuitive, right? So obviously, if you go back to your earlier point about it's people who make the decisions based on their individual hot buttons, right? That they may or may not have about a problem that they're trying to solve. Well, the person can be reached in a variety of different ways. So, for example, in our direct mail practice, often we'll end up seeing if we can append the home address of the individual onto the file and not just mail them at work because they're probably only at work on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. They're probably working from home on Monday and Friday, right?
Yep.
So being able to hit them in both locations increases the odds that they see the direct mail. And then, of course, adding custom QR codes to it to ping the CRM is even better because then if they do happen to trigger, at least they raise their hand as a Glengarry lead. The other fun thing is once you've appended onto the customer data file their home address information, you can do CTV into the household. Okay, so the kid's going to see the ad as well. Nothing you can really do about that. But then you can sort of decide, okay, well, let's do sports and news, right? So then it's more likely to be an adult in the household.
Well, that's some like, again, old school marketing practices coming again.
Reinvented.
You think about everything you and I did in the explosion of digital was getting. And I mentioned that earlier today. Just because I can do one-to-one doesn't mean I should. There's a whole sorts of privacy regulatory problems with that. And did they opt in first? And did they opt into getting additional messages here, 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 and here, or not? But at the end of the day, I just think it's really interesting if you kind of follow that through and what can you do with that information. And, and I think what's really interesting about that is, I think it's bringing back a different approach to media buying, which is more, I'm buying a publication based on the composition of my audience that's consuming that content. So to your point, I can match the IP address to the household address, and IP address is privacy compliant. That's safe to use anywhere, and it's the number one for now. But I also don't think that one's going to go anywhere anytime soon because it's the main thing used for fraud detection and bot detection and all these other kind of things.
All these other really important
and if
factors.
They try and take that away, do you take away your ability to track my household address? And we know that's not going anywhere. So the IP is just a digital version. There's all those kind of debates, right? So for now, I think that's a safe one to go on, So, but then to your point, you can actually, from a media perspective, say, okay, well, I don't want the kid to see the ad. Well, I'll put the ad to the ad in Squawk Box that's streaming to the same IP at the house.
Right.
Because the kid's probably not watching TV when that's on.
Right.
Or not paying attention at the very least. And I'm going to get the attention of the right person in the household. I think the other thing that gets really interesting to your point of the remote work now is working with partners that can be really smart about the IP address at that level and how they're tying it back at a household, particularly when it comes to ABM. Because, if you have your offices, here in Boston, you can draw a circle on a map around it and 80% of the workforce probably lives around there. But post-COVID, there's still people that have been hired that are, in Philly or Dallas, but the headquarters are in Boston. So traditional geo targeting around IP is you'd miss those remote workers. But now, with AI, it can get really smart and find patterns that we won't see and be like, well, the computer that shows up at this IP address in Philly all the time is once a month at the same IP address where Acme Corporation is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me factor that in because that's probably a remote worker or a contract worker.
Yeah.
And again, in the buying committee, maybe not the primary decision maker, but they're probably influence whoever is.
Yeah, it couldn't hurt, right? I mean, obviously, even if you were trying to reach everybody in a building, right, because that was a prime target for your ABM efforts, the janitor's going to see it,
Yeah, totally.
right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so you know, there's a waste factor in every media, right? But
Yep.
it's balancing that off. I still remember there was a VP of media back when I was at McCann Erickson in 1992 that said, at the right price, I'll buy any media,
Yeah.
right? Because it's basically factoring the waste factor against the price of the media,
Yep.
right? Yeah, there's waste, but I mean, imagine the challenges that the denture and diaper companies go through all the time, or the people who sell honeymoon vacations. Really narrow window
Yep.
when you can actually reach the person when they're in market, and so sometimes you just got to buy the soap opera because you think eventually that person's going to be in the
Well, and
target
that's the
market.
thing I talk to the audience about when you're doing ABM in the mix. Some of the media you might buy, like what you're describing, is kind of tonnage, traditional direct response advertising that my click-through rates are atrocious, my conversion rates are horrible, but my cost per lead's great because the media was super cheap.
Exactly.
Right? But then the flip side is, I can have better click-through rates, stronger conversion rates, and I know I'm driving, especially in the world of B2B, a better marketing qualified lead that'll become a better sales
Yeah.
qualified opportunity. However, the cost per lead is going to be higher because the CPM is going to be astronomical, but there's little waste. So then you run into like, well, that's really performing really good, but it's really expensive.
Yeah.
And I don't have any volume.
Right. Oh, you cap out on it.
You
Of
cap
course.
out real fast, right?
Sure.
So I think you're spot on, like with that. And again, that's more traditional, old-fashioned media buying and media practices that I think are going to start coming back into vogue. I feel like you and I lived in our career in the early days of the digitization of traditional media.
Yep.
And I feel like now what we're experiencing is the next 10-year run is going to be really the traditionalization of digital. All those reach and frequency, audience composition metrics, buying tonnage to balance out your volume and your cost per.
Amazingly, like those two things are happening still in parallel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about what percentage of outdoor advertising or out of home advertising is now digitally delivered.
Yep.
Right.
But it's still bought, sold, and measured with traditional metrics, even though I'm buying it digitally.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. It's going to be exciting stuff.
Well, it was great catching up with you, Rob. Thanks so much for joining me on this quick impromptu podcast.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Pleasure.
Here we are at DigiMarCon.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.